First off, I need to thank Alex and Mandy for inviting me to share some of the results that I've had while doing a pilot study at a local pediatric hospital. We did a quality improvement study and seeing how the listening program would complement the therapy services at an outpatient clinic. So I need to thank, as well as the two research directors at LDS Hospital that allowed and helped me kind of work through the HIPAA regulations and things like that, and being able to share not only the case studies but also the video footage, and also the manager of the site that I work at that has been very open-minded and willing to try progressive and complementary therapies in a more traditional type of therapeutic setting. So with that in mind, when I first met Alex, he had a statement. He said, "The listening program is a program that will complement your therapeutic interventions and jumpstart your outcomes." And I think I've learned that to be true. So we'll first talk about my little friend MS. We'll call him M. Get that to go. His developmental history is when he started the program, he was 4. But now he's a 4-year-old male. He had a diagnosis of ADHD and PDD, not otherwise specified. He's a pretty high functioning kid with a reported IQ of 120, as well as a sensory processing disorder. He was born at 40 weeks gestation, 8 pounds 9 ounces, with vacuum extraction after 45 minutes in the birth canal. According to his mother, she reported that he obtained his motor milestones within normal limits, as well as independence with toilet training at age 4 years, 6 months. His first word was at 8 months, 2 words at 18 months, 3 to 4 word phrases at 36 months, sentences at 40 months, and conversation language that occurred at 42 months. He does have a history of ear infections, and they placed tubes at 24 months. He's had hearing assessments. They all resulted in normal results. Visual skills reported to be within normal limits. He's also right-hand dominant. At age 3, he attended a public special education preschool for 1 year, and then was deemed he did not qualify for services at that point after a year. So now he currently attends a private, regular, typically developing preschool for 3 days a week, 3 hours per day. His current outpatient therapy services, as well as while he was participating in the listening program, he had OT twice a month and speech therapy twice a month. So when we first see kids, we do an assessment called the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. The basis of our therapy really is family-oriented, so we want to make sure that the foundation of our goals are grounded in what parents really want to see. So his mom wanted him to decrease his excess activity that occurs in the late afternoon, early evening, in order to participate in meals and structured activities within the home. She also wanted to see him decrease his aggression when playing with siblings and peers, as well as tolerate a wide variety of wet and sticky textures during play activities at home. So the short-term objectives that we initially had set was I wanted to see him improve, his ability to wait and control his impulsive behaviors. We also wanted to see him engage in kind of wet and sticky play activity for longer durations of time, as well as having his family participate in a sensory diet at home to kind of help modulate his system at the end of the day. One of the things that I noticed was he actually is kind of a mixed modulator in that some days he was bouncing off the walls at the end of the day. And I think a lot of that was due to when he was at therapy and at preschool, he worked really hard to kind of keep things together. And then he'd come home and he'd fall apart. Other days, he would come, by the end of the day, he was wearing hats and hoodies, hiding under blankets and withdrawing to corners and quiet spaces, indicating some levels of sensory overload. So some of his occupational performance strengths, we would say his IQ, he was a very bright kid. His gross motor skills were quite well organized and put together. His self-help skills were good, as well as his feeding and eating. He was not one of those picky eaters based upon what Mom had reported and what the reports I was getting from a speech therapist, which was great. Deficits, though, of course, expressive receptive language delays with social skills, sensory processing difficulties, so he's hypersensitive to sound, to touch, and multisensory processing, meaning a lot of his sensory challenges took on a cumulative effect. Throughout the day, they would build, so he had a really low threshold of what he could tolerate. By the end of the day, he would fall apart. And he had really short attention, and he was quite impulsive. His tactile skills were, he would briefly engage in tactile play, but it didn't last very long. So before we started the listening program, I remember we had a kind of a big bucket full of the cornstarch and water. And he didn't know what it was, so he was running by, kind of running around, and he put his hands in it, and they sank to the bottom, and he just started to cry because he just couldn't. It was just so intense and so overwhelming. And then when I could get him to engage in some other sticky stuff, but it was always okay. I've got to clean myself. We couldn't engage in something longer than 2-3 minutes. It was always we had to escape somewhere, clean everything off. And when he did go to clean himself, he'd kind of have this safety mode when he'd walk to the sink, So it was great. So let's see. So prior to the listening program, we had him fill out the client history form. We did a sensory profile, and we did that in January, I believe, and then we did it after he did one cycle. So how many occupational therapists do we have in the room? So raise your hand. Okay. We're going to have a brief conversation. Typically, we don't usually use the sensory profile to measure outcomes. But from this standpoint, I'm looking at it from parent perceptions. I had a conversation in the month of May with Zoe Malou, Dr. Ayers' former research assistant, and we were talking about how parents will fill out a sensory questionnaire to kind of tease out what's happening at home and things like that. But as they get more educated on sensory integration and sensory processing, they tend to scrutinize a lot more. And I think that might be the case with some of our listening checklists and assessments as well. So I actually kind of wanted to see, she was really sensory savvy. Is she really going to perceive functional changes or behavioral changes within the home? I did a Peabody just kind of as a normal thing that I do to assess fine motor skills as well as transitioning between activities and tasks. And he was within normal limits, 37th percentile for grasping and 63rd percentile for visual motor integration. We did a listening checklist, as we'll show, and then we did some home video footage. Actually, Mom did in December of 2005, and then she did some other footage in June. So the tomatis zones that we were focusing on, of course, zone 1, sound sensitivity, touch sensitivity, multisensory processing sensitivity, as well as the aggressive behavior, receptive and expressive language, and the attention and impulsivity, as well as his creativity and ideas, or his play skills, as well as some more expressive and receptive language. So the listening program that he participated in, we did the level 1 kit, but we started out with SI Classic, and it was just more, we did that more during therapeutic sessions before the pilot actually started. I was just using that just to facilitate more attention, more engagement, and to provide more intense therapeutic sensory integration therapy. He's on the base schedule, so he did twice a day for 15 minutes. He actually just barely finished the second cycle. So the video footage that you'll see is actually halfway through the second cycle. The sensory profile and the listening checklist that we'll review was just after one cycle. And then he did 2 weeks of SI Kids after beginning the second cycle. And he used the open system headphones. So what I did was I just took the listening checklist and put it into an Excel program and just kind of made a graph. So we could see the perceived changes based upon his mother's perception of what was changing after the first cycle. So we see, changes in his attention, able to attend and stay focused. His distractibility decreased. His oversensitivity to sounds decreased. Misinterpreting requests and questions. His receptive listening was improving. Needing repetition and clarification to questions and requests, that improved. Ability to follow 1 to 2 step directions, that improved. Difficulty understanding discussions, that really improved. Becoming sleepy when listening to speakers. I wonder if that's more improvement of his sensory processing, in that he wasn't shutting down because of the overwhelming auditory stimuli. All right, so here's the expressive language section. So we see changes in, and I'm, of course, I'm not a speech therapist, but I thought I'd at least, document some of the changes. So as fluency and rhythm, Mom perceived to change, recalling word usage changed, summarizing a story really improved, as well as relating isolated facts. Okay, so then here's this section that goes over motor skills and level of energy and behavioral and adjustment. So the biggest things we say, Mom perceived as having difficulty with posture and slouching and slumping, and she perceived that as being no longer an issue. That improved. As well as the atypical drive for movement and touch. It was more for movement, I think, to kind of help organize his tactile system, and that's no longer an issue. And then if we look over to behavioral and social adjustment, low frustration tolerance, that seemed to improve. Difficulty with time concepts and punctuality, that improved. Judgments and generalization to new situations, that's no longer an issue, which is super. Lack of tactfulness, that changed, as well as being able to tolerate stress very well. And I remember last year, Dr. Minson talking about the bone conduction system, and he said, the listening program really lengthens the fuse that sets kids off. And I feel like that's the case with my little friend here. It was really short, and it's lengthened now. It takes a lot more to set him off and organize himself. So let's quickly move on to, the sensory profile. So we see changes, of course, in auditory processing, changes in touch processing, changes in oral sensory processing. We see a little bit of change in the other direction, in modulation of movement affecting activity level. And I think that, I wonder, is that more of an issue of him being more active and social and friendly to peers, because he was getting more out of those social and play activities. We also saw changes in emotional and social responses, behavioral outcomes to sensory processing. That's decreased. The fact memory scores, big change in inattention and distractibility, poor registration. I wonder if, as you'll see, he's a different child and attending to things differently, where that might be, he's registering information more and responding to that information more correctly and appropriately. So this is just some of the things that he drew. I asked Michael, I just let that out. So I asked him, just draw some pictures. So he drew some pictures, and I'm like, well, who's that? Just a guy. So he drew pictures of just some guys. Okay. All right, so if we could switch to the DVD, and what we're going to do is we're going to watch a Christmas program that he participated in just before last Christmas. So here's the guy in the middle, sort of, with the white shirt. The one that's yawning. That's the first yawn. The one in the white shirt, yeah, just right there in the middle. You don't see a whole lot of changes in affect, a little bit of participation. Sometimes timing is a little bit off, so that was a little bit early. Okay, we're starting to lose them. Okay. It's about that low threshold. Okay, so this is the first of 5 songs for the Christmas program. So this next one is going to be the third song. And remember, he's a tactile kid. So he's wearing that hat. Watch him with this hat. Okay, here we go. We're starting to rock. Okay. Struggling. Okay, and then, of course, Mom pans away, because that's normal. She's seen that before. But she wants to see what the other kids do. So there we go. Okay, and I just can't tolerate that. And I don't know if I could tolerate it either. There we go. Oh, and we're going to cover our eyes. Here we go. Okay, what are we doing? Yeah, we just lost him. And he's still trying to sing, and he's closing everything off so that he can at least do something. Yeah, he's 4 at this time. This is when he was 4. He turned 5 in February. So if you notice, at the beginning it was engaging, at least he knew where Mom was with the video camera. There wasn't much social interaction going on, but that's really strong. Okay. Oh no. Okay. Now we're going to shift to the last song. So we see this progression of. Another one. Sign of stress. Oh. There we go. And we're done. Okay. He's still trying to sing. He's not going to budge. Okay. So we can shift back to the PowerPoint. One of the things to keep in mind is looking at younger kids, we can always look at them from the looking at their arousal level, looking at their action, their attention, and their affect. His affect was flat. His attention was really shifting and flighty. His actions were, when he did do them, there was some incoordination as well as timing issues compared to his peers. And, of course, his arousal level went pretty high with some of his behaviors. So I want to go over the journal entries because these are kind of interesting. So week 1, this is once they're in the level 1 kit. Immediate sensitivities to loudness, voices, TVs. He was quick to cry, refused to listen on one of the days to tracks 10 through 12. Week 2, he was defiant. Mom said he was a crybaby. And these are just what she put. This isn't what I put. Emotional at school, very sensitive at home. Week 3, he was manic and difficult to manage. Week 4, he was hyper. Week 5, said he was done before it was time to be done with the listening program. hard to get his attention. Hungry. Scattered with his focus. Hungry. Sleeping longer, hyper during listening times, and a big-time crybaby. Week 6, more complex speech and thought processes. Clear expression of ideas. More verbal but distractible. Week 7, distractible, not sleeping well. That's kind of a big jump in frequencies. Week 7, alternating between active and talkative to sad and withdrawn. Very determined in how he thinks he should be. Other children and adults better able to understand him. Week 9, better verbalizing his moods and how he feels. Increased understanding of those talking to him. And then the biggest thing, complex unscripted pretend play. So before he was reciting, songs, TV commercials, and movies. And then one day they were playing house, and he was each time they played house, the story changed. Or when Mom would come in to play with him, Mom would change the story, and he was able to build upon that story spontaneously. So his play skills changed. Week 10 seems to be more aware of feelings and is more secure in expressing them. More calm periods more often. Okay? So here's another picture that he did about halfway through his second cycle. The interesting thing that I find with this is something he did for the speech pathologist. And I know there's a story related to this. So what he's putting down on paper is, though the quality might be about the same, it's much more dynamic. It's not just the same thing or the same type of thing. We have a rainbow, we have some looking guy, a heart. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So let's go back to the DVD and we'll look at the spring program that they did in June to see how he looks. Look at his affect, look at his attention, his arousal level, and his action. So this is song number 1 out of 9 songs they did. So his timing's really improved. He's actually better than some of the kids. I love this song. And it's actually nice that Mom panned around so that you could see what the other kids were doing and to see where my little friend was at. He doesn't miss a beat. I wonder. I would hope not. Okay, so this next song is actually the 5th song that they'll do. So you'll see a progression. We're looking to see, does this fuse longer? And tolerating multi-sensory input. Now we kind of lost him here. She's got another little baby that kind of runs the show, so... Sing along if you'd like. pretty good. Look at that. Okay, so this is the eighth song. So I just wanted to show you he's wearing a costume, he's tolerating stuff on his head. Doing a neat little dance there. Okay.
On the way, she met a pig. A silly pig. They danced a jig.
Okay, so that's the end of there was a ninth song, but it was more of a graduation kind of thing. It's interesting to note that the first Christmas program he did, he cried at the end, I think because he was overwhelmed. At the end of this one he cried, and his mom asked him why he was crying. He said, well, it was because school's over. So he really had some insight to what was happening and that whole idea of time and space and the beginning and an end. So we see a lot of changes, and it's one of those things where we do see changes in his affect, we do see changes in his arousal level, his actions, as well as his attention. So I just want to, with this one, I'm just going to close this specific case study. There's some other slides that you'll see in your handout, but just really what Mom says. And I think in this first little subtext, she says, my husband refers to the program as his magical music. And then she says, towards the end of the first cycle, Michael burst into tears one day, and when asked why he was crying, he said he was crying because he was sad, and he was sad because I made him have quiet time, which is non-nap time. I cried for joy in his ability to put those two concepts together. He experienced sadness, he knew what caused it, and he could express that to me. And then, the last little comment is a comment related to his play skills with peers. But I want to jump to the next slide, and you can read that on your handouts. It's actually the last quote. This is from a speech pathologist. She said, I feel the program has helped him make greater leaps and bounds in his overall progress than if he were just to have speech and occupational therapy alone. I think that says a lot when we're, especially in my kind of a setting where we're trying things that are new and progressive and might face some resistance. That says a lot when it's coming from your professional peers. You can sing along if you'd like. Pretty good. Look at that. Okay, so this is the eighth song. So I just wanted to show you he's wearing a costume, he's tolerating stuff on his head. Doing a neat little dance there. Okay. Okay, so that's the end of there was a ninth song, but it was more of a graduation kind of thing. It's interesting to note that the first Christmas program that he did, he cried at the end, I think because he was overwhelmed. At the end of this one he cried, and his mom asked him why he was crying. He said, well, it was because school's over. So he really had some insight to what was happening and that whole idea of time and space and the beginning and an end. So we see a lot of changes, and it's one of those things where we do see changes in his affect, we do see changes in his arousal level, his actions, as well as his attention. So I just want to, with this one, I'm just going to close this specific case study. There's some other slides that you'll see in your handout. But just really what Mom says. And I think in this first little subtext, she says, my husband refers to the program as his magical music. And then she says, towards the end of the first cycle, Michael burst into tears one day, and when asked why he was crying, he said he was crying because he was sad, and he was sad because I made him have quiet time, which is non-nap time. I cried for joy in his ability to put those two concepts together. He experienced sadness, he knew what caused it, and he could express that to me. And then, the last little comment is a comment related to his play skills with peers. But I want to jump to the next slide, and you can read that on your handouts. It's actually the last quote. This is from a speech pathologist. She said, I feel the program has helped him make greater leaps and bounds in his overall progress than if he were just to have speech and occupational therapy alone. I think that says a lot when we're, especially in my kind of a setting where we're trying things that are new and progressive and might face some resistance. That says a lot when it's coming from your professional peers. So let's jump, for the sake of time, to the next case study. This is T. She's 8 years, 8-year-old female. She was referred to OT due to concerns with her handwriting and coordination. She's right-hand dominant. At the time I assessed her and she started the listening program, she's in a regular second grade classroom, and she'll be in third in the fall. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 21 months. And it's interesting, Mom notes that when that diagnosis happened, she noticed changes in organization and perception of body. Things just were different. She's done a little bit of research, and she said that she's found some sources. She hasn't been able to substantiate the sources, but that early onset type 1 diabetes can damage the vestibular nerve. I don't know if any of our MDs can validate that, but I thought that was interesting. And that idea will play in our conversation. She really didn't have a significant birth history. Early on, she had difficulty making some speech sounds, the R's, and issues with fluency. She has and still has difficulty with reading, written language, and spelling. She has a history of ear infections, and both her vision and hearing were tested to be within normal limits. She currently gets OT once a week, and then speech therapy services twice a week in a group setting at school, though she didn't qualify for outpatient speech therapy, and she hasn't gotten any school speech therapy over the summer. Mom wanted her outcomes to be the family goals. She wanted to be able to tie her own shows independently and get ready for school, improve her coloring and her handwriting legibility with more success at home. When we started the listening program and part of it through the cycle, we do what's called modeling, where every 3 months we reassess, and if needs be, we put them on a different model based upon some criteria that's specified in this type, so that we're seeing kids when they're responding to therapy the best. So we're not seeing them when they plateaued, and so that idea of seeing kids forever, we stopped doing that, which is really good. And it's really actually going to be a good way to use the listening program. So we want to see her improve her self-care skills, being able to tie her shoes. We want to see some better handwriting and hearing to the bottom line. We also had a scissor cutting skill that she actually met that goal at week 8. So I pulled that one out. Okay, so some of her strengths in relation to occupational performance or motivation. She's a girl that she'll try anything regardless of the outcome, which is great. She's got a great temperament, and she's got a high level of cooperation. Her deficits, though, visual motor integration, fine motor incoordination, bilateral coordination and sequencing deficits, issues with her body scheme or body awareness, decreased vestibular functioning, and attention and impulsivity issues. So let's go. So her tomatis zones, we're looking at poor balance for zone 1, coordination, right-left discrimination, body awareness, and sense of direction. For zone 2, speech, attention, memory, and concentration. And zone 3, ideas, creativity, or her play skills. Okay. So what I have for you is really just her outcomes after 9 weeks. So she just barely finished week 10. So actually, just after the 4th of July, she got CD10. So we started out with SI Classic a little bit during therapy to see. She's on a base schedule. She's done one cycle. She's got the open headphones. I did a sensory profile when I assessed her, and that really came out. And when kids, the sensory profile is really looking at sensory modulation and behaviors, and a lot of motoric issues don't really come through. And this goes, Mom she knew something was wrong, but didn't know what. So that didn't really, didn't want to use that. But we did the Brunics. She had a raw score of 8, standard score of 2, and she was minus 3.0 standard deviations below the mean for visual motor control. Upper limb speed dexterity, raw score of 20, standard score of 4, and 1.92 standard deviations below the mean. I did the BOT, again, knowing that normally we don't do a standardized norm referenced assessment after 6 months, as well as we know that the BOT 2 is out, and we had that assessment, but I kind of wanted to see, well, can we tease out any change? So visual motor control, and she turned from 7 to 8 during this time, so she jumped kind of segments in the interpretation and scoring. Raw score of 11, standard score of 4, and a jump in improvement in standard deviation. She still has issues, but we see a bit of a jump. Upper limb speed and dexterity, 25, standard score of 5, and still the same, minus 2 standard deviations below the mean. Knowing that this kind of a test may not be sensitive enough to tease out changes in motor quality. Okay, so she did the listening checklist, client history. We also did the Ayers clinical observations. So you OTs, when I did these, my proficiency was not up to par, so I hope you'll forgive me. So let's see. So if we go, I did the same thing with the listening checklist just to see what Mom's perceptions were. So we see changes, adverse changes after 9 weeks with easily distractible, especially by noise. But I think we're resetting the system, okay? And you'll look at her, and when you see her she's got a flat affect. Her arousal level is really low. So the fact that she's more aware, I think this is a positive outcome. Her sensitivity to sounds changed. Confusing similarly sounds words has really changed. Needs repetition and clarification, more than once. That really changed. Able to follow directions. Understanding discussions improved. Must read material several times to absorb content. I'm not sure how to tease that, Mom's perception on that, out very well, because some of her comments would go to the contrary to that. Tires easily. I think she's tired easily because the listening program has jump-started the system and it fatigues her, which actually is good. So we'll go to the next one. Speech quality changed, fluency improved, word usage changed. Sings out of tune. I didn't really do much singing with her. I tried to sing with some of my kids, but that's where I see the sound sensitivity stuff come out. So I don't do it too much anymore. I don't want to offend the kids. Poor spelling improved. Summarizing a story. This one as well, Mom made comments that would go contrary to that. And if we look at the motor skills, the biggest change was before she had difficulty with organization and structure. And she's one of those kids that would come to therapy just kind of messy. Her hair was in disarray. She had a hard time keeping track of what she was supposed to do. She was just that disorganized kiddo. Let's see. She had difficulty initially with time concepts and punctuality. That changed. She wasn't completing assignments. So we see changes in overall organization of tasks and thinking and things like that based upon Mom's perceptions. So here's a handwriting sample before. Most of my kids, I have them do pen pals because I don't really want them to just do rote stuff. I want it to be age appropriate. This took about 45 minutes of a lot of cueing to her to facilitate what to write. So we see poor spacing. It's light. We do see some overstroking of letters, poor letter formation, increased erasing, which affects legibility. letter placement on the line, as well as word placement. And like I said, it took a long time to facilitate her to conceptualize what she wanted to ask this new friend. So this is after, and what I did is I gave her 2 pieces of paper because I wanted to give her the type of paper she writes on at school and some paper that she was writing. One of the things we see is the writing is darker. Before she was writing light, and that was more of a body scheme proprioceptive issue where she didn't really know where her hands were in space, so we're seeing, that affects legibility. It's a little bit darker. We see fewer errors in letter formation, less erasing, increased legibility. She was independent with this. I left the room, and she wrote these out. I didn't really have to do anything. And here's the next one. This is the kind of paper that she writes on at school. And again, I just had her write stuff. I didn't really have to do anything. It was great. Okay, so I'm going to blow through the journal stuff because we've got some video footage. Week 1, Mom didn't report anything. Week 2, she started saying her R's, which was super. Speech therapists have been trying to do that for a long time with her, and she's saying all of her R's great. She's a fidgeter, so she's not fidgeting as much. Mom noted she's able to calculate double-digit math in her head. She actually can now calculate her carb count in managing her diabetes now. And she couldn't do that on paper, let alone in her head. Week 4, this was great. She can jump and skip rope, forwards and backwards. And she just picked it up in like 5 minutes, which you'd watch her do stuff, and it was just like, it was so laborious. It was just amazing to me. She was able to, week 5, she was able to swallow oral medications. She couldn't do that before. So we're seeing an increase in coordination. Week 6, she presented a 4-page report, an oral report, and was able to comprehend and remember the information from that report. Week 7, she can snap her fingers, set up, made, and cleaned up a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Increase in overall task organization as well as space management. Week 8, nothing reported. Week 9, I thought this was kind of interesting. Poured chocolate milk from a glass back into a 1-gallon jug independently without spilling. I don't know if I could do that. Okay. So then week 10, which is just what I got a few weeks ago, nothing significant as of yet. So that's kind of what Mom reported. This is interesting. The grading here in Utah is different. It's not A, B, C, D, E, F or anything like that. It's based upon numbers. Term 2, I believe, started in March, and Term 3 ended in June. We see big jumps in fluency, vocabulary, comprehension, writing, handwriting, reading. And she actually, her reading level was a reading level of like a C at the beginning of the year, and she jumped to a K, and then with the listening program, she jumped to an L, and L is above grade level for reading for her 2nd grade class. But I don't really know too much about that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch some of the clinical observations based that Jean Ayers came up with. Actually, I'm following a protocol that was developed by the University of St. Augustine in Florida, their postgraduate doctoral program on SI. So it might be a little bit different than what you'd see with some of the stuff that Pediatric Therapy Network has put out, or some of the old video footage from Dr. Ayers. So let's jump to that real fast, to the DVD. Okay, and we're going to watch finger tapping. So let's do that one. And these are just about a minute and a half. So we're looking at the quality, the change in the improvement that she demonstrated. And again, looking at her attention, her affect, her action, and arousal. And if you could turn the volume down, I don't want to really hear myself talk on that as well. So if we could turn the volume down. Okay. So this is where we want her to tap sequentially, just with index and thumb. So we see overflow to that opposite hand. It's really laborious. She's really pressing hard. We see movement of her fingers. She actually has to look at them to do it. So, she's got decreased body awareness, decreased speed. Some of those fingers she's actually slapping some of those times. She does it together, and they're out of sync. They're not coordinated together. Again, we see, look at her mouth. We see overflow to her mouth. Okay. This is after 9 weeks. So, yeah, Mom's behind the camera. This is part of the problem. And it's a little grainy. So as Mom goes in and out, the video camera, of course, when you're working at a large bureaucratic hospital, technology is a little bit delayed. But she's able to do it. She doesn't have to look at it. She's able to flex all of her fingers and keep those tucked into her palm without having the other fingers flopping around. Okay? See? So this is where they touch each finger with their thumb and back. She has a model. It's a little bit hard to see. Okay, so she really has to find her fingers. Well, where's my pinky? We're going to see clumping of fingers. She really has to look. You see overflow to her mouth and some overflow of movements to the opposite hand. Okay, now I want her to do it without looking at her hand. She really struggles. And granted, she's got very low muscle tone, so we're expecting to see low feedback. There's going to be some proprioceptive issues, so she doesn't have a lot of feedback from the muscle spindle fibers and the Golgi tendon organs and things like that. So she really just can't, she can't do it. Again, we see overflow, so we see a little bit of nervous system immaturity. Okay, and look at that affect. She's just, whoa. Okay, here we go. Oh, she's looking. Okay, and I want her to do it without looking at it. She closes her eyes. And this is just after 9 weeks. We started seeing changes at 5, and I thought, okay, this is we want to see this. So we see she's able to flex and find the tips of her fingertips as well, instead of going at the bottom of the first phalanx. We still see overflow, but again, this is only 9 weeks. Okay. This is really slow. So here we go. Now she's ready to go. This is great. I'm going to do ramping. This is a good assessment of body awareness as well as kinesthetic functioning. So let's watch her do that. There we go. Okay, so we see some jerky movements. She starts leading with one arm and catches up with the other, and that goes ahead. She doesn't really get the idea of an arc, and I actually modeled this for her before. There was some editing that I did. So she doesn't even really know where things are, and every time she goes, it gets lower and lower. See, it's just a matter of just pointing to her shoulders as opposed to really arcing. So this is after. Still a little jerky, but it's much smoother. And look at the sequencing and the timing together, and finding her shoulders is improved. A little jerky there. But after 3 tries, she definitely has a better sense of where she's at in space. So let's move on to the alternating form rotations. So this is where she just rotates in pronation and supination. We're looking for smoothness. Everything's very deliberate, a lot of slapping, a lot of overflow. And she's doing that with her non-dominant hand. She's right-handed. Okay. And it's actually worse with her dominant hand. So she has to look. She just doesn't know. Everything is so deliberate and jerky. And we can do it together and watch this. So it's really segmented, I guess you could say. Okay, so here we go. So that was her dominant hand. We saw how jerky and deliberate it was. I mean, she still is pressing. We don't see the light touch on the thigh there, but we definitely see more smoothness and fluidity. And we do both. There's very little asymmetry compared to the pre-testing. So, see her just roll her eyes. So, yeah, Bryan, come on. This isn't fun. Too easy. Okay. Let's go to menu 4. The reason why I chose to do the clinical observations based on for sensory integration is I wanted to do something that wasn't going to be practiced. I wanted to do something that's, it's not a functional skill, but it does show changes in body scheme, vestibular function, proprioceptive functioning, kinesthetic awareness, things like that. So let's go to the balance beam, and then, for the sake of time, how much time do I have? Am I done? Okay. So we'll do the balance beam. She falls off. Really slow movements. And she still lacks a lot of stability in her ankle. We tried to do a 1-inch wide balance beam, and she just lacked the stability to remain on an elevated surface and perform a motoric activity. So she falls off each time she crosses that balance beam. Okay, so here we go. So her movements are quicker, smoother, a lot less postural adjustments, and her arms are less. She falls off that first time. They aren't above her shoulders, where before she almost had a high guard when she was crossing that balance beam. Okay. So just to kind of summarize, we also did oral motor. We'll kind of pull out and go back to the PowerPoint. We did some oral motor assessment, and she had difficulty with that and still does, though she was able to dissociate or separate out the movements between her neck and her tongue. So when she'd rotate, I tell her to move her tongue to the side of her mouth, she doesn't turn her head and follow. She's able to dissociate those movements. We also did we did the shoulders arm extension test, and she had less chorioathetoid movements of her fingers, as well as she was able to she had more segmentation of her trunk. Initially, she would you'd rotate her head, and her whole body would shift. Now you're starting to see the shoulders lead, and the hips are still following a little bit, which you don't want to see, but there's a lot better awareness of where she's at in space, as well as proprioceptive feedback. So she made huge gains. And this is just some comments that her mom made about the program. They were very skeptical at first. They were very skeptical. And we have more referrals for the listening program at our clinic from her and she tells everybody. So just, I'll let you guys read that, but just kind of based upon the richness of those comments, regardless of who's providing